Hello fellow artists and art enjoyers, my name is Will, also known as Lineart. Today we are making a character reference sheet while I ramble about the process of making the sheet itself, the character design, and a couple other topics like commissions and my social media break. Now this reference sheet, including the design, was commissioned by Raelice, a fellow content creator. He wanted me to bring to life an inside joke that was 2 years in the making, that several artists have touched, but that never really got completed. So how this whole thing started was, he gave me a reference board to better convey his ideas, and it was actually very useful for determining what kind of design he wanted, how much time it would take me, etc. So sometimes in the footage you'll see on the left side of the screen, you're gonna see the ref sheet and some additional references I picked out. So what I took away from the reference sheet was, he wanted a pretty basic modern outfit, and the character would mostly be defined by her unusual quote-unquote hair and tail, because it's based on leeches, because she's a leech. Obviously, I still wanted the outfit to look fitting to her personality and not be boring, because basic can be boring, but it doesn't have to be. And if someone commissions me for a pretty basic design, I'm gonna do my best to not make it look boring. On top of that, I also looked up some additional references for some of the clothing parts, and I also took a reference picture of my arm for the pose. Taking a picture of your own reference poses comes with the additional benefit of not having to scroll through Pinterest for 5 hours to find the exact reference you're looking for, so highly recommended. The plan for the ref sheet was having a front view that's shaded, a back view with flat colors, a shaded headshots, and then some callouts for specific clothing details that we will get into later. Now more about the actual character. Her name is Raelice as Cloud. I am not 100% sure on the backstory of this character, so take all of this with a grain of salt. Maybe if Raelice sees this, he can comment down below how wrong I got this. She's like based on the idea of VTubers selling out and doing everything for the money, and that's the only reason that they're VTubers. And I definitely try to implement those elements in her design. So based on that, she's meant to be very confident and cocky and like kind of doesn't care what other people think. She's kind of like a mean girl, I would say. That's the vibe she gives me. Now during the sketching / line art process, I'm using a brush that I only recently discovered / made. I've really loved using this brush actually. It's fun to doodle with, and usually what I would do is I would do a sketch, I would lower the opacity of a sketch, then maybe do another sketch on top, and then do line art on top. But with this one, I've actually found myself sometimes just doing the sketch and like cleaning it as I go, and then I don't have to do any line art because the sketch looks clean enough. And that's been really like cool and freeing. I was often very mechanical with my line art and very like perfectionistic. And there can't be any gaps because I want to use like color fill and stuff, color drop. So this has been a really refreshing experience actually. I've enjoyed it a lot. If you guys want to try the brush, I'll link it for you. You can download it. For the pose, I kind of picked something that looks very like confident, like hey, I'm taking up space, I'm showing off. Here, look at me. I'm cool, you're not cool. And same thing goes for the outfit. Obviously, it was not meant to be like a super incredibly detailed design like I would do for a Genshin character perhaps. But it was still meant to be kind of like a show-off outfit. So basic, modern, but kind of show-off with like all the gold chains and stuff. Let's talk a bit more about designs in general. I haven't really offered design commissions in the past, and there's a lot that can differ between processes for different kinds of designs. For example, for this one, I had a very clear reference sheet. My commissioner knew what he wanted from it, and it wasn't a design that was like supposed to be like super over the top, super like crazy detailed and stuff. But if you compare this to my VTuber model, for example, that design took me around maybe like 15 hours, And that's only the design, that is not the finished art for the model, that's just the design part. Whereas for this commission, I'm not sure how much the design part was, but the overall time I took finishing all of this, let me check this. The overall time it took me to finish this entire reference sheet was 10 hours and 50 minutes, so like 11 hours. Whereas, as I said, my VTuber design, only the design, no finished artwork, no reference sheet, took me probably 15 hours. So you can tell there's a big difference between the two. And if you are taking design commissions, that's something you should definitely consider, because boy can you undercharge yourself there. When it comes to design commissions, I often give clients different options for stuff. In this case, for example, I gave him different versions for the clothing on the lower body, since the upper body he had referenced pretty well, but the lower body wasn't like explained at all. So I kind of came up with my own ideas for that and gave him different versions and let him pick his favorites. Same for the coloring actually. I did a couple different colored versions once the line art was done and gave him the option to decide between them. He ended up meshing them a little bit together, which is totally fine by the way. If you give different options for outfits and stuff, you should always make sure that your client knows that they can take different parts of different outfits that they like and kind of mix and match them together, at least if you're comfortable with that, because I think that will end up with a more satisfying result for them as well. And on that end, I've actually been thinking a lot about the way I do commissions and what kind of commissions I want to take. I have had my commissions closed for quite a while now, and I'm thinking about reopening them sometime soon for the public. This commission is actually not one I took because I was open for commissions, but because Raelice DM'd me and asked if I was interested in doing this. But I do want to reopen my commissions for everyone in the future again. There were a lot of things that I was like asking myself about, which is what commissions people want from me. For some specific parts, the pricing even. So if you guys are interested in my commissions, or if you guys would just like to help me out, I would really appreciate it if you could check out this Google form. I will link it below. I essentially made a Google form where I ask questions about my commissions, what people are interested in. There's two sections, the VTuber art section and the VTuber rigging section, where I also ask about pricing. And even if you are not interested in getting either of those commissions, but you have like an idea of pricing in that kind of industry, it would be really helpful to me if you could answer the pricing question. The form is a little bit longer, but you can skip all of the sections that you are not interested in, so it shouldn't take too long. Plus, there is a little surprise at the end, so I would consider checking it out if you don't want to miss out on that. On the topic of selling out and social media, the week before I'm recording this voiceover, I had a social media break, meaning I did not check Instagram, I did not check Twitter. In fact, I deinstalled both of them from my phone, and I also did not look at YouTube statistics or comments, but I did still watch YouTube as I just enjoy doing that. The reason for this was that I often just found myself scrolling through my feed whenever I had like a little in-between moment where I wasn't doing stuff, but I didn't want to start doing another thing yet. So I was just scrolling, and sometimes I was in voice chat and I was scrolling, and honestly, it did not give me anything back, it just drained me. There's just better things in life to do than scrolling on social media. And with better things in life, I literally mean I could be sitting there just doing nothing instead of scrolling, and it would be better for my mental health. Now obviously social media isn't all bad and all that fun stuff, but for me I just needed a break, so I did that, and it was good. Having said that, if you guys like my art and you would like to see all of the different drawings that I post that may not get a video made about them, feel free to follow my Instagram or Twitter account. That way you guys can always know what I'm working on, and it also lets me know that you guys appreciate my art. So thank you if you left a follow. For now, I've decided to mainly focus on my YouTube channel and just post art on Instagram and Twitter whenever I have art to post, and not think too much about it. Now back to the actual artwork. Fun fact, if you see the phone right there, the other commission that I got from Raelice was designing a book for him, and the phone design is very heavily based on the book. In fact, I, in the beginning, just copy-pasted the book into my file and just put that on the phone just so I had like a rough idea of what it would look like, and then later I actually went in and designed the phone. And we're moving on to shading. The shading for this one, I think, really brought it together. Shading for me is also one of the like most fun parts because I just love using colors and stuff. I just love using colors. I love making them just vibrant and beautiful. For this one, I went with kind of like more purplish tones for the shadows. As you can see in the jacket, for example, it's like kind of like a bluish tone. And in the skin parts and the red parts, it's more of like a purplish color for the shadows, which I think makes it look very vibrant instead of like dull if you use like kind of grayish colors for shading. For the skin shading, you can also actually see me adding kind of a brighter orange tone to the edges where the shadow transitions into the like lit parts of the skin. That's basically because when light hits skin in real life, it will also kind of transition from a darker shade to a brighter tone because your skin is not completely opaque like rock, for example. So the light will actually kind of go into your skin, and that's kind of where this like funky bright color comes from. You can definitely also do that on parts of the outfit where that technically isn't the case, like I also did it for some of the jacket, for example, with like a little bit of an orange tone, just because it looks nice. Like, it doesn't always have to make sense, it just has to look nice. That's the entire purpose of this, unless of course you want it to make sense, in which case good for you. But I think in most cases it's fine to just do stuff because it looks nice instead of worrying about if it makes sense in the physical realm. And then on the skin parts, I also add some highlights just to make it look nice and shiny. And another thing I recently started doing, sometimes when I put down highlights, I'll copy the layer and the one that's below will get a darker tone, and then I will put some blur on it, which will kind of make the highlights stand out a bit more. And it can also make it look more vibrant. Like, I believe you see it on the hair as well, where I go in with like a bright red tone, and then below that I go in with a darker but still really vibrant red and blur that, which makes it just pop a lot more. It's just a fun little thing I picked up. On the hair, I kind of started off with a subtle gradient, which goes from kind of a like brighter orange tone into the actual red that the hair is supposed to be, and then into a more desaturated kind of cooler tone. And I think that just helps bring it to life a bit more and make it look less flat. Red tones for me are one of the most fun tones to color, just because they can be so like rich and strong. And also in this case it was meant to look very shiny since this character is based on leeches, and leeches are kind of like a little bit like wormy, slimy kind of looking. So I tried to really bring that across with the shines on the hair. And same thing goes for the tail, of course, since it's meant to be kind of the same material. For this video I actually tried a kind of new style after deliberating for a while, because I usually used to use Procreate time-lapses for these kind of videos, meaning I will literally take the video footage that Procreate automatically creates when you draw on a canvas, and that works, but sadly they often end up pixelated because obviously there's only so much space on an iPad and they kind of have to compress it a bit. And honestly, maybe that works pretty well for more painterly stuff, but for stuff that has line art like I often do, it just looks not great, and it did bother me. Plus, it feels a lot more mechanical and less organic because the way it records is it doesn't record the time you spend on a brush stroke, the time you just look at something, the time you spend picking colors. It just records each stroke and just plays them as if they all happened in the same amount of time. Maybe it's not as obvious, but if you pay attention to it, you can tell when video footage is just recorded and sped up, or if it's a time-lapse. And then the other thing is, I looked at my old design videos, where I still used real-time recorded footage but sped it up, and I quickly discovered it gave me a headache because it also recorded all of the zoom-ins, and when that's sped up, that is really hard to watch. And the other issue with that approach, the massive amount of space those files take up. I would have literally had like 10 hours of footage for this drawing. Now I've also seen other people do it where they place an actual camera next to them when they work and they just film their drawing device. But the issue with that is I am drawing in my bed and my table is literally my legs. First of all, I don't want to film in my bed, and second of all, the camera would not be stable anywhere because it's a bed. So that idea is also out of the window for me. So what I decided to do was to use real-time recorded footage that is not sped up, and then kind of fill the gaps in between that with Procreate time-lapses so I wouldn't have to record all of the process. And I also don't think you guys have to see like every step of the process, every stroke that I make. So this is kind of like a better way to summarize stuff, I guess. But if you do enjoy this format, you can definitely subscribe, because I'm planning to do a lot more of this type of content, since that's what I feel comfortable doing. Although I am not going to lie, the voiceover part is still hard for me. I am not a person who will easily ramble about stuff. I usually have to write a script, and even then I'm like, is this enough? Am I like talking enough? Is there something I should go more in detail about? I just never know. It's a little bit hard for me. I'm a very like straight to the point kind of person, so rambling is not my strong suit, but I will try to work on it. I started working on the callouts for some of the objects. So for example, I added a little jacket callout, just because I think in the front-facing pose, it's a little bit hard to tell what the writing is supposed to say. So on the front and on the back of the jacket, the text is supposed to say sellout. I think if I did not add this callout, it would have been a little bit hard to tell what it was supposed to say. Of course, if you see the back of the jacket, you can be like, okay, it makes sense. If the back of the jacket says sellout, then it's probably meant to say sellout as well. But just to be sure, I added this jacket callout, which also showed off the little thumbs up button on the zipper. And then the other callouts are the hairband, which is pretty difficult to see in the front view, the watch, which is very detailed, which is why I wanted to include it there, and the patches that are actually on the jacket itself. They're kind of going off the side of the jacket, so with them it's also a little bit hard to tell what's going on there. For the watch, I had detailed instruction to put Raelice's logo on there, and I thought it would be kind of a cool idea to have the middle part of the logo, which is the kind of 4 squares, inside of the actual watch part, and then have these little side parts that don't really fit in the watch to be kind of on the leather part of the watch instead. It's a pretty cool detail in my opinion. Plus I kind of like the idea of having like a gold embellished type of material on the leather. Then I'm also rendering the gold on the callouts. I think I've talked about this before a couple times, but rendering gold is pretty fun. It's kind of just about putting a lot of contrast into the object you're rendering. In some cases, in this one not as much, but in some cases it's good to consider the objects that are around the golden material. So for example, if you were holding a golden ball outside, it would very likely reflect some blue because of the sky, for example. But in this case, that was not as much of a concern. So I just made it look shiny. Originally, I was not planning to really shade the callouts much, but in the end I caved in because I felt like a little bit of shading would go a long way on this. So I did kind of a little bit of like gradient shading. Nothing too fancy, nothing crazy. It does make a difference. And then we get to the face. Now, if you know me, if you know my art, you've probably seen me draw a lot of crazy grins, smirks, angry expressions. I just love drawing those types of expressions. It's really fun for me. I love showing off teeth. I love making the eyes look unhinged. I also definitely wanted to make sure that in this specific call out in the face, that you could tell that this character actually has play button shaped pupils. In the front facing reference, you can tell, you can see it, but the thing is it's really small. And knowing that this is a reference sheet, meaning that it will very likely be passed on to other artists later to commission art of this character, it makes sense to make sure that people can actually see this specific detail. Other than that, I also wanted her eyes to look really sharp and like they could stab you, and like just you kind of feel this spiky, aggressive, confident energy of this character, which I usually like achieving with really pointy eyelashes. Usually if I draw characters, you'll often see me do pointy eyelashes for kind of like sharp characters. Then for more like soft, gentle characters, I'll do a little bit more rounded eyelashes, though it depends, but usually they won't look as spiky if the character isn't meant to be embodying that kind of sharpness. And then I also add in the hair. This was really fun because her hair, because it is kind of like worms, leeches, that means it's not going to look like typical hair. It's not going to have the same shapes as typical hair. And I think this is really fun because of the big, strong shapes that it gives you. It's very fun to draw. Just shapy stuff is so fun. And then of course I add the big $sign chain around her neck. I just felt it looked a bit empty without it, plus it's a fun little detail and it's gold and I like rendering gold, so you know, gotta have that there. And there I am rendering the eyes. Rendering eyes is just one of the things that I'm always looking forward to doing. It's fun, you can kind of experiment a little bit, there's no right or wrong way to do it. There's a lot of contrast there, a lot of vibrancy, a lot of life, random shapes that you can pop in there. And I think most artists will agree with me there. I mean, there are probably some artists, let me know if you are one of those, who hate drawing eyes, who just draw the most basic eyes they can. But there's also a lot of artists who will put the most effort and detail into the eyes. I would say I'm kind of in the middle, though I am always looking to like make the eyes pop. Oftentimes though, they are kind of small in the canvas for me since I do draw full body stuff, half body stuff. But yeah, it's always fun when I can kind of zoom in and focus on the eyes. Do some funky stuff that may not make any sense, but if it looks good, it looks good, you know? And here you can also see me doing the thing again where I add a little bit of a vibrant darker color underneath the highlights just to make the highlights pop a bit more, especially against the white of the eye. That's a really good trick. If you guys are making an artwork and you have a character with light skin, or you're trying to put highlights in the eyes, if the highlight doesn't pop enough because the base tone you're working on top of is already pretty bright, you can always put a little bit of a darker vibrant tone underneath your highlight and see if that makes it better. That's what I've been doing a lot recently. Alright, now here's a little sped up time lapse of the whole artwork. I think it's pretty interesting to see the condensed process of how I started, what I did next and stuff. Kind of seeing the real order of things and all of the iterations I went through. For example, you could just see a little blip of the different color variations I made. I couldn't show you guys all of that in real-time footage because, as I already said, it would have taken a massive amount of space. If this video was entertaining or valuable to you, or you just straight up like this type of content, you can let me know by leaving a like on the video. That would really help me out. And then here's just a little time lapse of me like organizing all of the different parts and adding a little bit more info, a little bit of text, a color palette, which is very useful if you're planning to use a reference sheet to commission more artists so they can easily color pick. For these kind of reference sheets, I usually always add a line where it's like the character belongs to this person and it was designed by me or drawn by me, just so that the commissioner, if they commission a lot of people, always can find who made this one. And so the people who see it can always find me as well. I add some fun stuff to the background, a little bit of a gradient, some arrows to the callouts, an arrow to the money, because I feel like that is one thing that might easily be swept up, putting some fun graffiti splooshes in the background just because it looks cool. And yeah, that's the finished reference sheet. If you like watching me design stuff and rambling about it, here's another design video I made. And on the other hand, if you're struggling with, say, drawing different kind of faces, making them look unique, here's a tutorial I made on how to get rid of same face syndrome. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a great day. Will out.